And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I wanted to talk about my evolution of deck building with regards to color. I thought it would be an interesting topic to cover. Of course, color identity is really important in the Commander format. It's crucial to the Commander format, obviously, but it's something that really doesn't exist in other formats. If you're someone like me and you came from Modern or Standard, you come into the Commander format, and what's this whole color identity thing, right? It restricts the colors that you can play. You don't really see that in other formats, of course, based entirely on your Commander. Whatever the color identity of your Commander is, those are the colors that you're allowed to put in your deck, and you can't put the other ones. That is, of course, crucial to deck building in the Commander format, and it's something that, like a lot of players, when I first came to the Commander format, I was thinking, okay, well, obviously I just want a Commander with more colors, so that allows me access to more cards, right? I don't want to be restricted in what I can play, so I'm going to play an Atraxa, for example, right? One of my first Commander decks. Hey, that's going to allow me to play pretty much every color. I don't really like red that much anyway, so it's a win for me. So that's what I did for a long, long time in the Commander format. I was the guy who wanted to play more colors because I thought it gave me a big advantage. Of course, it does give you a big advantage. The partners had just come out as well in C16, and man, I went nuts there, combining partner pairings. I don't even know how many decks I built with all those original partners, most of them, of course, being 3 or 4 color combinations. So I was very much in the camp of playing more colors. That's what I did for the first year or so of my Commander career. But of course, there are some downsides to playing lots of colors as well, as I started to realize. A big one, of course, is the mana base. That, of course, in any format is an issue. And of course, it's one of the most integral parts of the game of Magic in general, which is you need certain mana to cast certain things. And if you're playing more colors, it's going to make your life a lot more difficult. Of course, today it's a lot easier than it was when I first started playing the game of Magic, but it still can be difficult. Cost is a huge issue there. I started to realize, man, I want to make all these decks. I just want to make so many decks. But if I'm making 3 and 4 color decks, man, that's the mana base just gets so expensive buying all those lands to put in those decks. But of course, even if cost isn't an issue for you, it's still an issue to have all those different colors in your decks because you need to tap certain lands for certain mana, right? It's going to make it more difficult on you in any game. Even if you have the perfect mana base that anybody would want for any, say, 4 color deck, it's still going to be really difficult for you because I need 4 colors and I only have certain lands. Even if I have the best lands and the most expensive ones, it's still going to be difficult for me. I got to be really careful with tapping my mana. You never have to worry about that with a monocolor deck, right? You don't have to think about which lands should I be tapping for which mana. It's a problem you don't have to worry about if you're playing 1 color or really 2 colors even. It's not that big of an issue. But when you play like 3 and 4 and 5 color decks, it starts to become a real issue. Mulliganing as well, right? In your opening hand, even if money's not an issue, it's still going to be an issue. Looking at your opening hand going, okay, do I have the right kind of lands? Do I have the right kind of mana rocks or ramp or whatever I need to get those colors to fix in the colors that I need, right? So you're likely going to be mulliganing a lot more when you play a lot more colors as well. Again, as a guy who plays a lot of monocolor decks, I don't mulligan hardly ever. It really isn't that big of an issue for me. I just have to make sure I have lands in my opening hand. So even outside of the money issue, it is also an issue just being able to cast your spells. And of course, for that reason, I started gravitating more and more towards less colors. And I even got to the point where pretty much the entire existence of my channel, I think when I started my channel, I still had a few 3-color decks, got rid of them. I, for the longest time, only had monocolor decks and 2-color decks. That's it. I didn't have anything above that. And I really liked it. It made it a lot easier to build decks. It made it a lot cheaper to build decks. And a big part of me playing the Commander format was I wanted to play all these unique, janky cards, as you could probably tell from watching certain videos on my channel. And I found that the less colors I played, the more I was going to be doing that, right? If you're playing 5-color decks all the time, of course, you're going to want to put Smothering Tides in all of them, and Assassin's Trophies in all of them, and whatever the commander staples are, you're going to want to shoehorn those into your decks because, of course, they're all the best commander cards, so you're going to want to put them in there. And if you're playing a 5-color deck, you're obviously going to be able to do that. And if you're playing a 4-color deck, again, you're not going to have a lot of restriction there. And I found the more and more commander staples we got, there was no Teferi's Protection or Smothering Tithe when I first started playing the commander format, and then there became those. So it's like, okay, well, I want to put those in all my decks that have white. So if I have every deck that has white, then I'm going to need those cards for every deck, right? And if you started shrinking down your colors, that restriction actually kind of became an advantage. I know it's not actually an advantage, but I see it as an advantage because then I don't have to go out and grab a Teferi's Protection or a Smothering Tithe because my deck is Rakdos or something like that, right? And more to the point, the reason I started playing the commander format in the first place is I wanted to be able to play all those janky cards. And of course, you still can if you play a 5-color deck, but it leaves you more room to do so, right? If I'm playing a mono blue deck, of course, I can't fit a Smothering Tithe or Teferi's Protection or an Assassin's Trophy or whatever other staple in all those other colors. I mean, I could still fit the mono blue staples in there, but that still leaves me enough room to fit a few of those fun, janky cards that happen to be mono blue that I want to play in the commander format, right? So playing a lot of monocolored decks, which I still do, allowed me to play more of these fun, interesting cards that I wanted to play in a commander game. So that's why I gravitated towards playing less colors. And in fact, for a while there, a short while, I actually had more monocolored decks than anything else. I even made a video about 5 reasons to play less colors, I believe I called it, and talked about, here's a bunch of reasons to play less colors. It was really, for me, the way to go for a long, long time. And it still is. All of that stuff still applies. However, I have started moving in the other direction a little bit. And there is a very specific reason why. And if you watched my video recently talking about all my brand new commander decks, I made a Spy Kit deck. Spy Kit and Psychic Paper deck. Essentially, those two cards are doing very similar things. And one of the big reasons why you kind of need to play more colors is when you're playing a jankier strategy, a more restrictive strategy. When your strategy is now very restrictive, you also don't want to be super restrictive on your colors as well. You want to open yourself up. And so when I put that deck together, I decided, you know what? I'm finally going to put a 3-color deck together in paper. And I allowed myself more colors because with 3 colors, I allowed more stuff to interact with the janky things I'm doing in that deck. I could have made a 2-color deck, then I would have had a lot less to work with, right? That's the reason why you might want to play more colors. Other than the obvious reasons, one reason for playing more colors is if I'm in that sort of restrictive strategy, or I'm in some very niche specific strategy that only playing 2 colors is just not going to give me enough. I want to play more colors so I can include more of those cards. And that is even more the case with my very newest deck. That's right. I've actually built another deck since doing my deck, talking about all the new decks I made this year. Pretty ridiculous to think about. I don't know what's going on with me lately, but I have made more paper decks for myself this year than I ever have before. And in that video, funny enough, as I was editing it, I was already putting together my newest deck. And I talk about it in the video how I wasn't going to make any more decks this year. And I actually put a little thing on there that people were probably curious about because I was thinking I actually had cards on order while I was editing that video. So I guess it's a little bit of a lie. I did make another deck this year, and that was even more colors. It's a 4-color deck. That's right. I went from having only 1 and 2 color decks for at least 3 years, maybe almost 4 years, to having now a 3-color deck and a 4-color deck being my 2 newest decks. And it is the case with this new deck, exactly what I just said. It's doing a very restrictive strategy, which means I gotta open up to more colors or else I'm just not gonna have a lot to work with. That strategy being the leaves the graveyard strategy. So the first card I actually remember having this phrasing was Desecrated Tomb, which came out in M19. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 bat creature token. So the very unique wording there that I don't know if we ever saw before that. You're just wanting any creature card to leave your graveyard. That can happen in any way. But of course, this was a very unique effect. There wasn't really anything else like it. Then we got Tormod the Desecrator in the Commander Legends. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this is whenever any card leaves your graveyard, not just creature cards. So a lot more we can build around here. And of course, this can actually be your commander. I'm sure a lot of people have found a lot of unique ways to build a Tormod deck. Then we got Strixhaven, and in Strixhaven, it was Boros that was doing this. Of course, Quintorius being the best example. Again, another commander where you can do that. Okay, so we're getting to a certain point where maybe we can actually build a deck around it. Again, if your commander's doing that, of course you can build a deck around it. But if you're building around that strategy in general, you want a certain amount of cards to get to a point, a threshold of, okay, now it's worth building around. Okay, that's the way I look at it with regards to deck building. We then got cards from Murders of Karlov Manor that are doing the leaves the graveyard phrase. And again, if you're already doing a Tormod deck, some other leaves the graveyard strategy, you might have included those cards in your deck, but there was a bunch of cards from that set that had the leaves the graveyard wording, and there was a few other cards from other sets sprinkled here and there that were doing the leaves the graveyard wording, and I wanted to include them all. Again, I thought if I'm going to do this with those cards in the 99, I need enough to build around. So like 8 or 10 cards is sort of that threshold that I want to actually build around the mechanic of stuff leaving my graveyard, right? And again, some of it is creatures leaving your graveyard and some of it is any card. So I can't just have my deck built around only any card leaving my graveyard. I need creatures leaving my graveyard. I need all that, right? So I wanted to include them both. So I thought if I include black and green and red and white, I will get pretty much all of those cards into one deck. So that's the deck. It is a non-blue deck, right? A black, green, red, white deck. Not doing a deck tech here. I know people are going to be wondering what the deck is doing. I will be talking about that coming up with my personal decks video. But basically the deck is leaves the graveyard triggers is what I'm doing there. And I ended up doing it in 4 colors because I thought I want to include as many of these cards as I can. Didn't want to leave a bunch of them out. If I only take one color out of that deck, there's a whole bunch of cards that I won't be able to use, right? I could do a Mardu version, but then there's like 2 or 3 green ones that don't get included. That kind of sucks, and I kind of want to use them. If I don't include black, I mean, definitely you want to include black. If I don't include white, there's a couple of neat ones in white that I kind of wanted to use. You certainly could do a very good Jund deck. You could probably even do just black and green and be okay, but I wanted to include all these cards in the 99. So a 4-color deck is what I ended up with. So it's kind of funny how I advocated so much for playing less colors, and I still do. Again, all those points stand. If you go watch that video, 5 reasons for playing less colors, all of those points very much still stand. And of course, I still have very much the majority of my decks that are monocolored or 2-color, but I now have a 3-color deck and I now have a 4-color deck. Diversifying is part of it as well, right? There are some cards, even in lots of different colors that I haven't been able to play, like an Unleash the Inferno, for example. That's a really great removal spell that I've been wanting to put in the deck ever since New Capenna came out, and now I kindly can, right? Because of course I didn't have a 3-color deck where it actually fits. So being able to play those cards in those decks does work with playing more colors as well. Anyway, you guys let me know in the comments below what kind of color combinations you playing. You play lots more colors because you just don't want those restrictions. You play less colors for all the benefits that come with that. Let me know in the comments below. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.